All right, we are thrilled to welcome to Theater in College Hoops a basketball lifer, one of the best players to come out of Toledo, ranking top 5 in block shots and rebounds and top 10 in scoring, an NBA draft pick of the Philadelphia 76ers, an international pro in Italy and Spain, and now an assistant coach at honestly one of the most lovable mid-majors in the entire country. From Grand Canyon University, we got Casey Shaw. Casey, how are you doing today? Thank you for joining us.
I'm doing great. Thanks so much. Thanks for that nice introduction. I appreciate that.
Well, so I'm doing a little bit of research here, okay, and that includes Wikipedia. Do you know that they still have you listed as the head coach at Davidson Academy in Tennessee?
I did not know that. I was the head coach for 1 year, so and that's been about 4 or 5 years ago. So that needs to be updated. I'm not even sure how to do that, but yeah, that's definitely needs to be updated.
So Wikipedia can be publicly edited. Do I have your permission to update your page? Because we got to get
Yes,
this
please
accurate.
do. Yes, please do. Please do.
I'll be sure
Yeah,
to
so
do that. One
I've been
thing,
at Canyon University now for the last 3 seasons. So going into my fourth season here at GCU.
it's been an awesome run of success in those 3 seasons as well. 2 NCAA tournament berths, a couple of conference titles, really impressive work. And we're going to get into all of that, Casey. One thing the Wikipedia page did get right, you're from Lebanon, Ohio. Confirm that for
That's
me?
right. That's right. Absolutely. Lebanon High School, the Warriors.
Unbelievable. So what a small world. I went email diving to a lot of assistant coaches, and Casey, nice enough to respond. And I see that you're from Lebanon, and I'm like, I've been preaching how much of a Southwest Ohio guy I am. I love Cincinnati, and my sister-in-law lives in Lebanon.
Yeah, that's awesome. So where I grew up was basically my backyard was a place called Kings Island, which I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's right there in Mason, Ohio, and wasn't too far from home. So that's kind of our uh, famous landmark. That and a restaurant called the Golden Lamb, which has had like 5 presidents come through and dine there. So that's the two. Oh, and the last thing, actually, you may not know this. Neil Armstrong is actually from Lebanon, Ohio. So,
That's
and Woody
incredible.
Harrelson, Neil Armstrong, Woody Harrelson from small Lebanon, Ohio. So that's our kind of claim to fame.
I love going to Lebanon, and like I said, I love Cincinnati. It's only about what, a 45-minute drive from there.
Yeah.
And so Lebanon's great, but yeah, all of those nuggets that you had mentioned, you got to tell the folks what Kings Island is though, because I don't think you mentioned that it's a theme park.
It is maybe the best theme park. Let's be honest. This thing has been around forever. They have a ride there. It's the largest at the time was the largest wooden roller coaster in the world called the Beast. And so that's I grew up riding that thing, and I don't think I fit on it anymore. I'm 6'10", so it's kind of hard to get on roller coasters. But when I was a kid, we loved it.
But Casey, so being from Ohio, obviously having gone to Toledo, right? I'm sure people are going to be 10 toes deep in Sandusky, right? Is that a better theme park in Sandusky than
I've been to Cedar Point, and I don't know. I've got my biases, I've got some biases that I just can't let go. Kings Island is a pretty special place. Now, I gotta say though, my grandma's property backed up to Kings Island property, and they had a little train that would go through this animal park at the time. It had llamas and stuff like that. So me and my brothers would actually jump the fence. I probably shouldn't be telling the secret, but we could jump the fence, go through, avoid the llamas in the train, and get into the park. And so that's why that's why I've got such great memories of that spot.
No, this is really helpful
Yeah.
because I got 2 nephews
Yeah.
who live in Lebanon, and they're babies now, but I know once they get into the mischievous stuff, they'll probably be doing a lot of that. So, it's
That's
great to
right.
have a veteran from there, and honestly, I could go so much further into this. So, before I move on to the actual basketball stuff, my brother-in-law says Southwest Ohio is home to the best wings. All right. So, I gotta ask you, Frickers or Roosters? Do you have a preference?
Ooh, oh gosh, that's a tough one. I mean, I thought you'd ask about Skyline or Gold Star Chili, the Cincinnati chili, but I'd probably go the Roosters. Uh, when I was there, the big argument was the Skyline or Gold Star, and that's the thing I always go for whenever I go home. My mom still lives in Lebanon, along with my three brothers and their families, wives, kids, everybody. In fact, my sister-in-law and brother are both teachers at Lebanon High School still, so I try to get back there about once a year. And whenever I do, I'm hitting Skyline Chili for sure.
Incredible stuff. I told you
Yeah,
about my nephews. I'm sure when they grow up, wouldn't it be amazing if they ended up being taught by one of your siblings or in-laws?
yeah,
That'd be
yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
So, I mean, Casey, I love that we started off right then and there, but now I do want to pivot a little bit to basketball and talk a little bit about your personal journey. Let's start with the playing career, okay? It's not often we get a ton of D1 players. I think it's really fascinating to peel back the layers and find out the story of the recruiting process and what that was like for you coming out of Lebanon. How'd you
Yeah.
make it to Toledo, and what were some of the other offers that you had?
Yeah, so well, I didn't play AAU. So in the mid '90s, AAU was around, but it wasn't anything like what it is today. There was five-star camps, blue chip camps, things like that, and that's where coaches did some recruiting. I did do a couple of those camps, uh, but I was a little bit unique. Neither one of my parents went to college, and so I was the first family, person in my family to go to college. So they didn't have any idea what this entailed. My dad was tall, but he wasn't an athlete. So I relied a lot on my high school coach, and my high school coach, Dave Merchant. His wife had a connection to Larry Gibson, who was the head coach at University of Toledo. Uh, Larry's wife and my high school coach's wives, they were related in some capacity. I don't know. I don't remember exactly how, but they were connected. And I think my high school coach called him, my sophomore, junior year and said, "Hey, you need to keep an eye on this big guy." Um, when I got going into my senior year, I took visits to three schools. I went to Toledo and Kent State, who are in the MAC, and my third visit was the University of Cincinnati. And I was ready to commit probably to UC at the time. I mean, in '94. Or let's say 92 or 93, maybe the Bearcats had gone to the Final Four with Nick Van Exel and Corey Blunt, some of those guys. I don't know if you remember some of those names. So I was really excited to go. But I remember on the visit, my mom and we watched a Bobby Huggins practice. And I love Coach Huggins. I think he's a great coach. But in the '90s, it was off the charts nuts. And so I was sitting there thinking, boy, I don't know if I could I can get through this for 4 years. So obviously a Hall of Fame coach and a great person, but yeah, I think the personal connection is what really mattered. I see that even now with recruiting in my current position, as an assistant coach. It's all about connection. It's like business. You network, people, and then those connections translate to helping find players and find good fits for your school and your program. So it ended up working out great for me at Toledo. Met my wife there, so couldn't be happier with my choice.
Absolutely. Ohio, obviously a big state. I mean, a lot of people just think, oh, Toledo's in Ohio. I mean, geographically though, it's not super close. I mean, you're pretty far from home. Um, I'm curious though, were there any schools outside of Ohio that you were considering, or were those the three main schools that you had really zeroed in on?
Yeah, I really didn't, and I feel really stupid admitting this, but I went back through some of my mom had kept some old letters, that I'd received from coaches, some of my recruiting letters, and she gave them to me a couple of years ago, and I went back through and I was looking at some of them, and I was shocked. I mean, there were some good schools, some really good programs, some high major type programs that had recruited me, and I just if they weren't in Ohio, I was just like, I don't know. I didn't really know the difference between, certain schools. And it worked out. God had a plan and all of that. And so I'm grateful that I ended up at Toledo, but I look back and I'm like, man, there's a lot, actually, I had a lot of options and choices, but chose to stick around, trying to be relatively close to home.
It was clearly a great choice, Casey. Like I said in the intro, ranked top
It
5 in
was.
block shots and rebounds, top 10 in scoring. So I think on the surface, a lot of people will just say, well, he transitioned super smoothly. But I know there's always a story from high schoolers going to college and then even that next level, college to the pros,
Yeah.
whether it be in the NBA or overseas or the G League, what they call the G League. Now, can you tell us a little bit about that transition and what that process was like, maybe from the summer of your senior year of high school going into freshman year and then beyond?
Yeah, so I'm fortunate to go to Toledo from this standpoint as well as I got to play. I did redshirt my freshman year, so I needed to kind of bulk up. In the '90s, it was a lot more important for big guys to be heavier and stronger. You had to wrestle a little bit more in the paint and post up, and so I did redshirt my first year to bulk up. But then I got to play. I got to play 4 years, and I started every single game except my first game of my college career for 4 straight years. And so, being able to go to a mid major and not be kind of pigeonholed into, okay, you're only allowed to do this, or you have to wait a couple of years before you get to play, was good for my development, because that's what I need. I needed to play. I needed to play more. But I was always pretty athletic. I high jumped 6'10" in high school, so I could always jump and run and do that. But I needed to get stronger and then develop more from a skill standpoint. And so, that redshirt year was really, really helpful for me. I'm very grateful for that. And then obviously then stepping in right after that redshirt year, I played with an athletes in action team the summer after my redshirt year. We went to the Ukraine and Poland. Uh, Maybe one other country. It was about a 6-week tour in the summer. Back then, you couldn't work out the way they do now with college kids in the summer with their coaches. So I went overseas and I played for about 6 weeks, and it ended up being tremendous. So I got game time experience. So I came right back into Toledo, and then, the rest is history. Went right into it. So yeah, those were good times to just kind of develop who I was and as a player and work on my game.
Curious to know, Casey, do you think that time spent playing at a mid major and now you're coaching at a mid major? And of course, you've coached at Vanderbilt, so that's a high major program. But do you think your time at Toledo, your playing days at Toledo, has served you in a positive sense now that you're at GCU, maybe relating to some of your athletes and your basketball players?
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, even like our staff here, I mean, I played at a mid-major and was drafted in the NBA. Coach Drew, who's our head coach, he played at a mid-major and was a borderline lottery pick. He was a 16th pick in the draft and played 6 years in the NBA. And so, it's very possible to go to a mid-major, especially today, because I do think that at a mid-major level, it's all about, if you can win, if you can get to the NCAA tournament. You look at the tournament this year with San Diego State. I mean, like what these mid-major programs have done now. There's so much more parity in college basketball, and so just being able to make a choice where it's a better fit, not necessarily the biggest offer, is I think it is important for kids today. And so, I mean, we've been to two NCAA tournaments in the last 3 years, and now we're building a roster not just to get to the tournament, but to try to advance. I mean, we want to get there and advance. That's the goal. It's progressed, and so we're competing against some really good programs to get players. But the thing I can tell players is, uh, you know, uh, we're in the Western Athletic Conference. We're not in a Power Five, but you can come here and you can perform, you can produce, and you can still get the exposure and to be on a national stage, get to the NCAA tournament that, frankly, a lot of teams that are at the Power Five level don't get a chance to do. I mean, we've been to more NCAA tournaments in the last 3 years than uh, you know, probably 10 schools in the ACC. You know what I mean? So, so I think that again, though, it's got to be the right fit and the right player and the right person, and it works.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And like I said, you guys have experienced a great deal of success in such a short tenure. Obviously, the Bryce Drew era and your era as well. And so, Casey, if we take it a step further now, I talked a little bit about transitioning from high school to college. we don't get many players on this program that have been drafted that have heard their name called. We had Roberto Bergerson on, who was an assistant coach over at Boise State. He got drafted, and I'm a sucker, Casey, for stories of draft night. So you really got to take us behind the scenes and tell us about what the draft process looks like. I'm here in Chicago. There's the combines going on right now. The lottery balls were ping-ponging last night. Tell us a little bit about your draft process, and then take us to that night. Give us all the nitty-gritty details of where you were, who you were with when you heard your name called.
Yeah. So before I do that, though, I got to say a quick Roberto Bergerson story because I love that
Please,
guy. This
please.
is where you just threw out a name that, like, the basketball world is so small. I played with Berto in Milan in 2001, I think 2002, in Milan, Italy. We were teammates together, really good friends. His wife and my wife hung out all the time. I remember he had this big dog that he brought. He had this humongous dog that he brought from the States, but an unbelievable player, a great man. I mean, I love him dearly. He's an awesome coach. That's so cool that you had him on there. But we're about the same age. So anyways, basketball.
Let me tell you something, Casey. I'm going to be sending that clip to both you and Coach Bergerson via email, because that's how I communicated with you both. So I'm going to kick off that email thread after this.
That's awesome, man. It's so cool. It's so cool. So, but yeah, I mean, the process for the draft, I think for me, the one thing I would say is, like, I wasn't necessarily thinking about the NBA until at least my junior year. I was trying to get my degree. I was so happy that I got my college paid for. And that was kind of what I was about. And then my junior year, I just tried to play hard. I went out and I just tried to play really hard. And I'm not the most skilled player. It wasn't like I'm, Dirk Nowitzki with threes and could handle, do all that, but I just played really hard. And so started getting some NBA attention. My senior year, there was talk that I might be potentially be able to be drafted, but I really wasn't on any draft boards. And so, but I got an invite to the combine, which is, what you're experiencing right now there in Chicago. So I went to the combine and I played really well. And to give you kind of a funny thing, I think over the weekend, I don't know, we played 5 or 6 games, whatever it was. I think I averaged a triple double, but it was points, rebounds, and fouls. You couldn't back then. I don't know if they do it now. You can't foul out. So they told me that when they told me, like, you can't foul out, I was like, this is great. Like, I'm going. And I was always pretty athletic and pretty strong. In fact, at the combine, I broke the bench press record, which was with 225 pounds, the number of times you bench press, which is a stupid test. I mean, and it has nothing to do with how good you're going to be as a basketball player, but whatever. But I did that, and I went out on the floor, and then I just played as hard as I could. I was like, it's like, you just have, got nothing to lose. So played really hard there. So immediately when we finished that weekend after the combine, all of a sudden my phone just blew up, basically. Now, we didn't have cell phones then, but you know what I mean? But so phone just blew up. My agent's calling me, and he says, there's a chance you could potentially slip into the first round. That's got to be the goal. So he says, we're going to work out, but you've got a limited time between now and the draft. And so I ended up having 11 workouts, and they were all with teams that were from about, the 18th pick to the 30th pick, somewhere in there. That was what I was trying to do, was to sneak in. That's a big deal if you can get in that first round. And so, had a bunch of workouts. The night of the draft, there was like, hey, it's possible you could go, late 20s, but we don't know. So watch the draft. I don't go in the first round, and the second round comes, and I remember the 37th pick. So that's the 8th pick in the second round. It was Philly's pick. I didn't work out with Philly. They didn't have a first round pick, so I never worked out. So I actually went to the kitchen and didn't even pay attention. And so I never even really got to hear my name called. I was actually in the kitchen getting some out of the fridge. And but yeah, I got picked by Philly and got a chance to go there. So, yeah.
That's incredible. I'm not going to call it anticlimactic, Casey, but I kind of wish for you that you were able to rewind that,
Yeah,
not go to the fridge. But
yeah,
and
yeah,
I want to unpack just one thing that you said there, and relate it back to what you had said earlier. So you had mentioned that watching a Huggy Bear practice, you were kind of sitting there and saying, I don't know if I can deal with this
yeah.
for 4 years. Fast forward, you're now in an NBA sort of training camp or an audition. Did you say to yourself at all, for those 8 teams or whatever it was? Uh, did you say to yourself, I don't know if I can handle this for the rest of my career? Like, did
Yeah.
that go through your mind, or did you sort of graduate to a point where you're like, no, I belong here?
Yeah, definitely grew up a lot, and it was. I don't know. I mean, I guess I felt like there wasn't a big difference between me and guys from the bigger schools, the bigger conferences, and once I got in that environment, I was like, wow, like I can actually hang and play, and so but I'll tell you, I look back and I think it was good that I went to Toledo. Coach Huggins is an awesome coach. Sometimes I'm like, man, I wish I would have gone to Cincinnati, but I do know this: I wouldn't have played all the games I did and started every game the way that I did. I wouldn't have had the freedom that I did at Toledo. And I know that Coach Huggins is obviously an excellent coach, but the higher levels you go, the more roles are defined and you have to kind of stay in your lane, so to speak. And I don't know if I would have played the first 3 years, I would have, it would have taken me that long, but my development was accelerated because going to a mid-major, getting to play earlier. And then I went to the NBA. You played for Larry Brown, who is an Hall of Fame, unbelievable coach. So even in my short time there with Philly for that season, got to learn a lot from him. Actually, house sat for him in the summer because he loved having Dana and I around, and just appreciated what I brought to the team. And really, really my opportunity to play for him was awesome.
Casey, you segued that beautifully. So what I need to do is dive into this Sixers roster that you were
Yeah,
drafted to. All
yeah,
right. And so I want to share this. And for those that can't see, we're talking guys like Matt Geiger with the
yeah.
with the mean barbed wire tattoo. I remember Matt Geiger.
Right.
Harvey Grant, great lineage. Tyrone Hill was a great power
Yeah,
forward. Larry Hughes, man, I'm a Celtics fan, so I love Jason Tatum. I love those boys from St. Louis. Larry Hughes. Of course, Allen Iverson, one of the
yeah,
greatest players. George Lynch from Carolina, Rick Mahorn. I mean, Aaron McKee, Nazi Muhammad,
yeah,
Theo Ratliff. I'm not just trying to go down the list. These are all notable, great players.
yeah,
Pretty much the core and foundation of the team the last Sixers team that won the Eastern Conference. You got Eric Snow at point
yeah,
guard, Tim Thomas. I mean, Casey, you look up and down this, led by a legendary coach. You
yeah.
look up and down this list when you're entering this. I mean, were you intimidated at all? What was your thought process like? I'm going to be sharing a locker room with these guys.
Well, the funny thing is, the first day that I got there, they gave me my locker, and I don't know if it was a rookie thing, but they put me right next to Allen Iverson, so I was actually right next to him for the entirety of the season. And it was what an incredible experience. But if you look at, as we looked at that list, what you'll notice is there's a lot of good big guys. I mean, everybody remembers Allen Iverson, and of course Eric Snow was an unbelievable guard. He was our captain, leader, coach on the floor. So was Aaron McKee, who was just recently the head coach at Temple University, his alma mater. But our bigs were really good. Theo Ratliff and Matt Geiger that year had just signed max contracts for them. Rick Mahorn, Harvey Grant, Tim Thomas was a 3, but he was still 6'10". Tyrone Hill. And Nazi Muhammad was drafted with me. Nazi was he was picked by Utah with the 30th pick, the last pick of the first round, but traded to the Sixers. And so I was a pretty relatively high second round pick. But I had a 2-year deal. Usually they give those high second round picks, a 2 or 3 year deal. But I didn't play. I'll just be honest, I didn't play. And so at the end of that year, I told my agent, I said, well, what are my options? And he said, they own your rights for 2 years, so you can, you can't go anywhere else, but you could go overseas and then come back. And so that's the route I chose to go overseas. Looking back in hindsight, I would have never done that because I never understood at the time. I do now as a coach, but your 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th man on a roster is so important. And I know Coach Brown loved me. I mean, I'm at practice every day early. I'm working hard. I was great with the guys, like, like, just, I wanted to be a coach, so I was always, talking with the guys, helping. I wanted to win, and that position's pretty nice. It's a good spot to be in the NBA. You just you go, you do your job, you be a good guy, you help in the locker room, and things go well. But unfortunately, at the time I was young and kind of naive. I thought if I go overseas, I'll be able to come back fairly easy, and that just wasn't the case. And so I left after my first year, went to Italy, and the rest is history. I ended up having a really nice career in Italy and Spain.
Yeah, and we'll get into that. Casey, if you don't mind, I'm going to write a little revisionist history, all right? If you stick
Okay.
around with the Sixers, 2001 NBA Finals, I think you lock down Shaq and the Sixers win the NBA title. No disrespect to Geiger and Todd McCullough, but I think you lock down Shaq. What do you say?
I think he'd probably break my spine in half. But I actually got to see Shaq up close, and he is a mountain of a man. So that was probably some of the highlights of my year in the NBA, was getting to see Shaq up close, getting to see guys like Kobe Bryant, Dennis Rodman. I don't know why his name popped in my head, but those were kind of David Robinson. Just kind of seeing those guys up close and getting in the game against some of them. Was really amazing. The size of those guys is incredible. Like, people know they're big, but the guys that make NBA players look small are humongous humans, like Shaq and these guys. I mean, like David Robinson. I mean, they're just freaks of just genetic men that just can dominate on the basketball court. So it was so cool to get to see those guys up close, and sometimes get in the game at the end of the game, jump in. And but yeah, I don't think I'd be helping us much in 2001 with with that.
We can chalk it up to fan fiction, but it is
Yeah,
a really good point that you bring up, and it's really fascinating, the evolution of the big man. I mean, you got guys like you had mentioned, Shaq, David Robinson, who's literally chiseled out of stone, and Adonis,
yeah,
and then this upcoming draft, one of the most generational prospects in Victor Wembanyama, who is
yeah,
a freak of genetic nature in and of himself, but he's not as shredded, let's say,
yeah,
or
yeah,
big as those other guys, and that's not necessarily a drawback. That
yeah.
actually might be a positive here in today's game.
It's amazing. Well, I tell you, the guy that really stands out was in my draft class that I think of, which is Dirk Nowitzki. And when he was picked, I want to say he was the sixth pick, sixth or seventh. I remember uh, Milwaukee actually selected Nowitzki and then traded for Tractor Trailer. And Robert Trailer was from Michigan. He was a really big body, big, strong legs, a real strong, big guy. And I think people thought, what is Dallas doing? Taking this skinny German kid. And the first time I saw Dirk was in summer league. That right after the draft we did, and in this summer league, I remember he walked into a hotel I was in, and I was blown away. His shoulders like filled a doorway. He was broad. He was a lot bigger than I had imagined, and he was really tall. Like, he was a lot taller than me. And I just, and then obviously that first year getting to see him was like, wow, this kid, he is unbelievable. And I honestly, I mean, obviously Tony Kukoc, guys like that began to progress the evolution of the modern big man. But Dirk Nowitzki is really the one that, once he came on the scene and was doing the things the way he could shoot it, man, that feels like he's one that really kind of helped, push it forward to where these guys are today.
Certainly a unicorn in every sense of the word. And
Yeah.
so you bring up some international players like Dirk, like Tony Kukoc, and you spent some time overseas. I want to dive into that. What was it like playing overseas? Again, Casey, it seems to me, as I unfold this, your basketball career has been a ton of transitioning, high school to college to the NBA and now overseas. Tell us a little bit about playing in Italy and Spain, if you don't mind.
Yeah, it was awesome. My first year in Italy, I was in a city called Cantu, which is north of Milan. And my wife and I had an apartment on the fourth or fifth floor that looked out, and you could see the Prealps. So the mountains that are right before the Alps, and it was It was just beautiful. We loved it. I mean, it felt a lot more like college, where the fans, the city embraced you as true fans that really lived and died with every basket, with every win, with every loss. And I loved it. I was embraced. I felt like by the people, um, and so it was always a tricky feeling of like, man, I really enjoy our lifestyle and the life that we have over there. I want to try to jump back into the rat race of trying to get in the NBA without a. It was awesome. We had 4 kids. We started having kids. My daughter was born after our first year in Italy, and then we have 3 boys. We put them right into public school, so they were speaking Italian, and yeah, we were loving it. So
Can you help me better understand this now, Casey, though, as someone who has played overseas and thought that was the most viable option for you at the time, and now you're coaching? All right. And so, what I want to bring up is this: I feel like there's some sort of stigma, or maybe there's not even um, the wherewithal or the idea that kids want to pursue a career overseas. Obviously, people want to play in the NBA. That's the end all be all goal. But do you think there are some kids who don't even think of overseas as an option, Casey? And I'll be honest with you, I think some of this might even be fueled by social media, in the sense
yeah,
that if one star player in the NBA doesn't have a good playoff series, they're like, oh, he's getting shipped to China or Italy, and it's like, by the way, those guys have great careers. All right, there
yeah.
is no shame whatsoever in playing overseas. Do you think there's some sort of stigma, or do you think kids who don't there are kids who don't think of overseas as an option?
Yeah, there probably is. I mean, the NBA is obviously the ultimate goal, I think, for most kids. That's what they see. But I will say this: you get overseas, and I mean, I got to play in EuroLeague, so I played in cities like Barcelona and Tel Aviv and Moscow, Paris, Rome. It's an incredible experience. I mean, Maccabi Tel Aviv, to play in front of that crowd, and what those people. I mean, it was so amazing, and you get treated like an NBA player. I mean, I played for Armani Jeans Milano, and so the owner was Giorgio Armani in Milan, and he made us all custom suits. I mean, we were living in a city like Milan, and just with him backing our team. Obviously, soccer is the big sport over there, but it was an incredible experience. I mean, we traveled well. That one year in Milan, I played with a guy named Danilo Gallinari, who's a longtime NBA player. He was in fact that year. I'll never forget. Gallo was being going to be drafted, and so scouts would come to watch him. But many times it was the lead head scouts of teams, and at that time Isaiah Thomas was one. I'm trying to think. Kevin McHale, Larry Bird, these guys actually came over and looked at him. And many times they'd say, all right, well, Casey, what do you think? He's a young guy on the team, he's 18 years old, how's he practice, stuff like that. So I got to, chat with a lot of these guys, but it was great. The other teammate that was on that team was a guy named Melvin Booker, who had a son, about 12-year-old son, who came over for not the whole time. He's only came over about 3 months. He's about 12, but he'd be running around shooting baskets in the gym. And his son's name is Devin. So yeah, so Melvin. In fact, Melvin lives here, obviously in Phoenix, and with Devin being here, but I remember after a couple of years, Melvin retired, and he said, I called him up one time. Hey, what are you doing? He said, well, he said, I'm not. He said, I'm retired. He's like, I'm done. He's like, I'm just training my son. I said, training your son? What do you mean? He's like, yeah, he's in high school. He's like, he's going to be pretty good. He's like, he's getting recruited a little bit. He's like, Kentucky, Michigan State are calling. They're recruiting him. He's like, but I'm just taking my time, just training him. I was like, oh, okay. here we are.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
That is truly unbelievable. First of all, Casey, if you don't want to continue pursuing coaching, you should be a storyteller. That was a great way of building up Melvin Booker. Huh, Booker should ring a bell, especially during this insane playoff run. That's
Right.
great stuff. But I mean, I'm sort of sitting back here marveling at how many stories and how many names you've dropped, and that's exactly why we wanted to get you on, because it doesn't matter who you are, the places you've been in touch and in contact with some of the most jaw-dropping names in the basketball world.
Well, I've been fortunate and blessed, and hopefully I've learned a lot over the years from some really good people, and am able to kind of impart some of that experience and wisdom to these guys on the Grand Canyon basketball team. That's my job, and but I've been really fortunate. I got some great stories. I'm from Lebanon, Ohio, man. I didn't, so I'm very grateful.
Absolutely. And I feel like we could go all day with the stories, but the meat and potatoes of this program is about college hoops. And I want to pivot now
Yeah,
to your school, to your team, the Lopes, baby. Let's talk a little Lopes here. I want to rewind to the WAC tournament.
yeah,
Okay. So you're the 3 seed entering this.
yeah,
Utah Valley is having a great season with
yeah.
Mark Madsen. Now he's over there at Cal. But you're the 3 seed, pretty much know, hey, we got to win this baby if we want to keep dancing. What's the thought process going into the WAC tournament? What was that preparation like for your squad?
Well, I'll take it back even. We were picked to win the conference last year. We had the preseason player of the year, our point guard, who was coming. And so we were actually playing well. We had the highest net team win in school history. And hit January, we were 2-0 in conference play. Our point guard tears his ACL. And so we lose our preseason player of the year point guard. Then we go a couple more weeks, and our starting center breaks his hand in a game, and so we lose him for 8 weeks. And so we had a very up and down season due to injuries last year, but we started to kind of figure out. I think Bryce Drew is an excellent, just in-game coach. That his ability to make adjustments on the fly and to change things from an offensive standpoint is really he's really good at it. And so we were starting to figure things out. We went into the WAC tournament. We were actually the 5 seed, so we would have had to win. We had to win 4 games in 5 days to go to the tournament.
I must have misread that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it was so obviously Sam Houston had a really good season. They ended up being the 1 seed, although Utah Valley, the way our conference did seeding was a little bit quirky this year. But Sam Houston ended up being the 1 seed, Utah Valley, Seattle was the 3 seed, or I'm sorry, Southern Utah was the 3 seed, Seattle was the 4, we were the 5. So but we played, went on a road trip up to Utah. And any coaches that listen to this will appreciate this, but our guys did a players only meeting. We were in Utah right before the WAC, and they did a players only meeting. We had a couple of our upperclassmen step up and say, listen, we want more out of this. How do we come together? And they did this. It was really player led, and it was a beautiful thing. And so ended up winning 2 games on that trip to Utah, beating Southern Utah and Utah Tech, and then went into the WAC tournament. And the rest is history. Won 4 out of 5 games, 4 games in 5 days, and which isn't easy to do, but our guys locked in. They played together. They played with heart and passion, and it was really fun to see. We kind of, like I said, we kind of had to figure things out though to get to that point where it's really hard. You lose a point guard, it's hard to bounce back from that.
Yeah. And I've long stated, Casey, that people overlook conference tournaments. I think there's so much great theater that goes on. Like you had mentioned, you got teams who need to clinch their tournament to keep dancing. They have to play 4 games in a row, which is insanely difficult to do. I don't care how old you are. That is so brutal to do. I'm curious to know, in that WAC tournament, which provided some great drama, I had mentioned Utah Valley. You're looking on, right? I'm sure you're looking at who your potential matchups could be. You see them essentially, I think they lost on a 4-point play, shocking 4-point play. And I'm not asking you to make any commentary on Utah Valley or anything like that, but when that happened, did you kind of say to yourself, hey, the door's a little bit open here, the door's creaked open, or is your team just saying, I don't care who we play?
No, I definitely felt like Utah Valley was a much harder matchup for us. So, but it was crazy. Our staff was there. We're scouting the game, so I'm sitting in the front row and I'm like getting all of Mark Madsen's play calls. I mean, I literally was sitting on the floor across from Mark, listening to every call he made and writing down the time. I mean, I'm literally, we're scouting, and Utah Valley is pulling away, and so I had Utah Valley, and one of our other assistants had Southern Utah. Well, with about 15 minutes to go, Utah Valley's up 20, 25 points. I don't remember. It was over 20. They were up by a lot. And he puts his notebook away. He's like, okay, like we'll start watching Utah Valley. And so it just, started, I think that Utah Valley started to kind of, you get up that much, 20, 25 points, and you start to slow down. You start to take your foot off the gas. As a coach, you do that as well. You're like, okay, let's slow it down. Let's use some time, use the clock. And it was a crazy ending. I know that Coach Madsen was yelling to foul early, but there's always that question: do you foul when you're up 3, or do you not foul? Well, he was yelling to foul, but his players waited until he was able to get into a shot. When he got into it, hits the shot, makes a free throw. What a lot of people don't remember, though, is they came down the other end, and Utah Valley did, and ended up getting a layup. A guy drove it down, threw it. I think it went off the back of the foot of one of the other players, and it bounced perfectly to a guy on Utah Valley's. He had a wide open layup, and he shot it over the back. I mean, he shot it right over the rim. It was I couldn't believe it. It was like wasn't meant to, because he hits that layup, it's they win. So, but to answer your question, Utah Valley was a really good team. We did not want to see them last year. They were stacked at every position, which they showed in the NIT tournament, or when they went to the Final Four of the NIT as well.
Yeah, we got a reunion up in Berkeley between Farda's Amick and Mark Madsen. There's that relationship
That's
there.
right.
But I'll tell you what, Casey, I was burning the midnight oil, maybe the 1 a.m. oil, because I was in Lebanon and you guys are playing in Vegas. Or not you guys, but that game was being played obviously in Vegas, and it was late for Vegas time. But I'm like, no, I'm staying up. This is what we live for here. This is March Madness. So of course you win the WAC, you get the automatic qualifier. So there's not necessarily any suspense come Selection Sunday. I guess the suspense is, who are we going to be playing and what seed are we going to be? And so I want to know, Casey, can you take us behind the curtain of what those few days were like prior to Selection Sunday? And what did you guys do as a unit? What did Bryce Drew have going on there, for Selection Sunday? Please tell me when your name was called. When GCU's name was called, you did not go to the fridge and pick something up.
That's right. No, actually, we have unbelievable support here at GCU. In fact, I'd encourage you and your listeners to go look on YouTube at some of our fan support. Havocs is one of the top 3 places to play a college basketball game in the country. It's unbelievable here. So we made even in Vegas, the whole arena was purple. It's just an unbelievable support that our president, Brian Mueller, has been able to build. Our AD, Jamie Boggs, has been able to coordinate the effort to get our students out and at games. And it was no different for the NCAA Selection Sunday. We got back and they set up the gym and had a great turnout of Havocs fans, support. They had chairs set up. They had the band, cheerleaders, dance, all of that. And so just made it awesome. Sometimes the guys will watch from their team room or, just the coach's living room or somewhere. We were in the gym and had a lot of people there. And, going into it, we thought that we would play a 3 seed. And so the 3 seeds at the time, there was talk. It was obviously last year, it was Kansas State, it was Baylor, it was Gonzaga, and I can't remember the other 3 seed. But
did you want to avoid Baylor?
Well, we all wanted to play Baylor, but we felt like the Drew brothers definitely wanted to avoid that.
Yep.
But I thought, boy, if the committee has ever wanted to publicize a game, like that, like publicize, like, hey, the Drew boys going against each other, this would be the time to do it. And they didn't do it. But I think Bryce and Scott were happy. And I think more importantly, Bryce's parents were happy. They didn't have to watch that game.
Yeah. So you got Gonzaga, right?
Yeah.
Julian Strother. You got Drew Timme to prep for. Mark Few, just a litany of great players. What was that prep like?
It's so hard. Strother had 28, so he killed us. The focus going into the prep is always on Drew Timme. I think it has to be. He's a proven, college player. He's unbelievable. So we were really locked in on trying to take him away. We did a good job in the first half. I think Drew still ended up with 20 points, but a lot of it came late. We did a good job on him. in the first. But Strother was so good at just flying off of ball screens and getting 2 feet into the paint, kind of coming off towards the middle, crossing the free throw line, and then shooting like a little runner, a little floater. And his touch was so amazing. We just had a really hard time defending that. You kind of pick your poison. Obviously, there's so many good players. Watson, their big guy Watson, hurt us as well, and so they're tough. I mean, they've been there. I mean, Mark Few. I mean, he's been to the last 6 or 7 Sweet 16s, and just an awesome coach. It's funny though. One of my best friends was on the staff at Gonzaga. His name's Roger Powell. Roger coached at Valpo with Bryce. We had played together in Europe, so when Bryce got the head coaching job at Valparaiso, he asked me, who would be a good coach. I said, well, there's a guy I'm playing with over here that wants to be a coach, and he'll be amazing. But I don't know if you can get him away from playing, get him to retire early. And connected him. And long story short, Roger ended up retiring from playing, coached with Bryce for 6 years at Valpo, went with us. We were on staff together at Vandy. And then after Vandy, he went to Gonzaga. And now currently just took the head coaching job at Valparaiso University. So he's back there as the head coach. But Roger was on that staff. So it was really a cool thing to get to go against one of my best friends. And obviously it's always awesome to be in the NCAA tournament, but you're always hoping for an upset when you're the underdog.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a very neat story. Roger Powell, just another name in the long list of names that Casey Shaw has come across. So you had mentioned how the next step now is to win a game or two and advance in the NCAA tournament. I'm curious to know, Casey, there's always players where in November, or even at this point here in May, but let's say November, once college basketball starts picking up, you don't know about them. And then come later in the season, late February, Valentine's Day, we'll say, people know them and their household names. I asked this question to David Miller at Xavier last year. Okay. I asked him, give me a name who nobody knows today, but they will know come crunch time. And I'm telling you, at around this point last year, dropped Sule Boom. Everyone knows Sule Boom. And what an amazing season he had. Casey, can you give me a name or a couple names that you think are going to be household names come, let's say, Valentine's Day? Give us some insider scoop here.
Well, if you want a mid-major name, I mean, I'm going to give you.
I'm talking about GCU guys.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Rayshon Harrison is one of our players who he transferred to us last year from Presbyterian. So he went from a low major school. Now he's transferred to a mid-major, and he just had a breakout year. In fact, we got him a couple of workouts. He went through the draft process this spring. So he just came back a couple days ago from his workout with the Brooklyn Nets. And he's going to withdraw his name because he's not going to be drafted this year. But I think with a good summer under his belt and another year of improvement and confidence, I think he could be somebody that people are going to be talking about come March next year, especially in NBA circles. He got some great feedback in some of his workouts that he's done, and so so we're excited with who we're bringing back. We also brought back Gabe McLaughlin, who's our power forward. Nickname around GCU is the Young Skywalker. He's super explosive, about 6'6", so not overly, he's not super tall, but really, one of these guys that can just put his chin on the rim and powerful athlete. So he's our foreman. We got those 2 guys coming back, and then hopefully we get our preseason player of the year point guard back from ACL. He should recover. Javon Blackshear should be good to go by the fall.
I can't wait to revisit this come early February, Valentine's Day, because I'm telling you, Casey, and it wasn't me, it was more David Miller, who's going to be, in my estimation, a head coach, and he's a very young, amazing coach, but he nailed Sule Boom. And I remember that after the season he was having, I was like, I'm going to clip this. I have the date mark and everything. So I'm excited to do that this upcoming season. Hey, I'll get you out of here on a few quick hitters, Casey. But real quick, I have to know, what makes GCU's home environment so special and so unique? Because I have been there. Rick Pitino, when he was at Louisville, said that was one of the toughest road environments his Louisville Cardinals have ever had to play in, and that he's had to play in. Rick Pitino has been in a lot of basketball arenas. All right. What makes GCU's home environment so special?
I think it's the vision of our president, President Mueller. when he took over this school in 2008, there were less than 1,000 students on campus. The school was basically going to go bankrupt. And he came in with his team and he had a vision for what it could be here in Phoenix, Arizona. And it's just exploded in growth. Next year, we're projected to have 30,000 students online, and we have almost 100,000, 30,000 on ground campus here, 30,000 students, and we have about 100,000 students online. You go from less than 1,000 to now to 130,000 students. It's just blown up. And part of his vision was to create a basketball team that could be the identity of the school. We don't have football here, and our basketball program really is the face. It's really is the identity of the school. And the Havoc section, that's what our fans are called, the Havocs. They're incredible. We have a national a band that has won nationals. We have a cheer team that's won nationals, and dance that's won nationals. So the atmosphere of the arena is electric, and it seats 7,000 people. We average attendance 7,100. So sell out every game. And that's not just the big games. I mean, I'm talking like our exhibition, D2 exhibition games, we'll sell out. And it's a blast. It is a huge party. There's a theme every night. We have Havoc leaders that come up with these themes and ideas, and they get out and they get the students going. Students will camp out in front of the arena, so you'll see tents out there. So just an amazing atmosphere that's been created here. And, we just need to keep winning so that we can continue to keep that energy and buzz about the program going.
Certainly think you're on that trajectory. I do a great job of shoehorning this little fact every single time on this show. I'm a University of Arizona guy. So really, Casey, the only basketball program I recognize in Central Arizona, wink, wink, is GCU. All right.
Yes, I got you.
Hey, let's do some quick hitters. Let's have some fun, and then we'll get you out of here. What's it like being brothers-in-law with Bryce Drew? I don't know if we've mentioned that yet here on this episode.
Yeah, so Dana and I have been married. We were married in '95. So
and Scott, for that matter. Sorry, and Scott Drew, for that matter.
That's right. I'll never forget in college. I met Scott and got to know him a little bit while Dana and I were dating, and he wanted to work me out. He was an assistant coach at Valparaiso at that time, and I said, "Oh, okay, this will be good." And he worked me out while I was still in college. It was the hardest, most awful workout I've ever been through in my life. I mean, he had me doing I probably shot 1,000 hook shots. I mean, it's this crazy workout. It was so hard. And I mean, I was like, what is this guy? Scott's about 5'10", never played the post in his life, but he is a pit bull when it comes to coaching, when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to, he walks in a room and it just livens up the whole place. It lights it whole. I mean, he's unbelievable. Everybody knows Scott, and Bryce is similar, but Bryce is much more of a analytical type of a coach. I mean, he gets down to the details. He does a great job of holding players accountable with discipline and details without degrading or cussing or any of that stuff. And so Bryce and I, obviously as former players, we were drafted the same class, and then we played 1 year together overseas in Italy, and we've been friends for obviously a long time, and I love working for him. I think, I know his quirks and what he's looking for when it comes to building a program and the type of players to recruit and what he wants to really accomplish. And so I've been fortunate to, to work for a head coach like him that I'm really close to, off the floor as well. And but it's awesome to be a part of the Drew family. I mean, Homer Drew, my father-in-law, is a gem of a man. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame. Obviously, he's won hundreds and hundreds of college basketball games, but an unbelievable human being. I've learned so much from him just on how to build the relationships with players, to get to know the guys, to do more than just try to win games, but to get these guys on a trajectory in their life where they can have success outside of basketball, and as fathers and as husbands, and that's been pretty special to just kind of experience that and learn that from him.
Yeah, that's a beautiful family dynamic there, Casey. And the theme of of guests that we've had on with father-in-laws that are notable. We had Chris Spatola on, and his
Oh,
father-in-law is actually Coach K.
yeah.
But the reason that, I wanted to start off with all of your personal accolades and everything is that, I want people to know that you're not just the Drew's brother-in-law. Chris Spatola isn't just Coach K's son-in-law. All of
Yeah.
those accolades, all of your amazing years playing the game, the people you've come across, they stand by themselves, that they stand by as Casey Shaw. So I do appreciate, you sort of diving into what it's like being a family member, but it's also worth, confirming that your accolades stand by themselves. So, Casey, what I want to do now, having said all of that, is
Yeah.
play a quick game, Scott or Bryce. All right. I'm going to ask you a question. And you can just give me either Scott or Bryce.
Okay.
More intense on the sideline.
I'm gonna. Oh boy, I'm gonna go Scott.
Scott, better sense of style.
Bryce.
Who'd you rather go on a double date with?
Scott.
Who's funnier? Who's the
Scott.
comedian?
Scott.
Who was more intimidating when you first met your wife?
Ooh, that's definitely Bryce. Bryce and Dana were really close, and actually, the first time I met Bryce, I hosted him. He came to visit on an official visit at Toledo. I was redshirting as a freshman, and he came on a visit just to hang out with his sister. He was never planning on coming to Toledo to play at Toledo, but that was the first time I met him, and he's pretty protective brother.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. All right, we'll move away from the Drews now. This is one of my favorite questions to ask guests. What was the toughest environment you've coached in and or played in? So again, you've had an amazing resume of playing. You've coached in the SEC. You're coaching in the WAC. It cannot be GCU. What is the toughest environment you've coached and or played in?
All right, so I'm sure people would say, Kansas. I've been in Kansas, the Rock Chalk Jayhawk stuff, and all of that. I've never coached or played at Cameron Indoor, but I've heard that it's pretty amazing. But I'm going to throw one out there that was the most unbelievable game I've ever been a part of, which was a city called Roseto in Italy. And during that game, there were people were throwing fireballs across the court. One of my teammates went to take a ball out of bounds to throw it in bounds, and somebody threw a hubcap out of the stands and hit him in the back of the legs. It was the crazy, and so we ended up. It was about 2 minutes to go, and we're up. We're up in the score. We're going to win the game. We're kind of pulling away from it. The crowd wasn't happy with the referees, so they start to shower lighters and coins down onto the court. Well, we run off because at this point, actually, I take it back. We didn't just run off. We look over. The referees go to the table. They call the game, and they go sprinting out of the gym. Well, when that happened, the crowd decides to come down and just basically try to get to those refs. There was riot police with the face shields, the batons. I mean, we got to run out of there, and people are getting hit with batons. It was the craziest thing. I've never experienced anything like this in my whole. I mean, you talk about fans that are. I mean, it was. We waited in that locker room for over 2 hours. Had to run to our bus. People were throwing rocks at. But when you think of the most crazy, like Italian, European kind of sports, like I experienced that and lived through it. It was unbelievable, and I'll never forget it.
And this is a man who's played in Philadelphia, albeit
right.
this is
Yeah,
like,
can't forget about Philly fans.
yeah, we've had some players who've played overseas, and that is the biggest thing that they say is, man, if you think it's cutthroat, it's crazy here in the States, go over to some
Yeah,
of the overseas. But that's incredible. I'm glad you
yeah,
gave us that reply. Just a couple more here, Casey,
yeah.
and then I'll let you go. In looking at some of the players that you've coached, right? I'd hazard to say the best player that you've coached is Darius Garland. All right. We
Yeah.
talk about the Ohio roots. You coached him at Vanderbilt. Did you know how great Darius Garland would be? I mean, what a season he had.
The connection with him, but getting to watch all of it. I know for sure he won 3 state titles. I'm pretty sure he won 4. So just a winner. I mean, knows how to win, knows how to play. So he's amazing to watch. I knew he was going to be great. Did I know he was going to be as good as he's turned out to be? No, but I knew he would be an incredible player. In fact, comes in as a freshman. I mean, we win at USC. We beat Arizona State. We beat who else did we beat? I can't remember. we had one more win, but we were getting top 25 votes that season, and he goes down. I mean, it was like, and again, you lose your point guard. It makes it tough. But Darius is a great kid, unbelievable family, and just a is a joy to be around. And I mean, unbelievable player. He's incredible to watch. And again, we were fortunate to have him. And still, in fact, he sometimes he comes through Phoenix, so he'll pop up here, and he and Bryce are still pretty close as well.
Cavs fans got a good one. The
Sure
folks
did.
of Ohio basketball, man, they got a really good one in Darius Garland. So we'll see how that continues. Casey, you've been amazing with your time. I really appreciate it. I'm going to get you out of here on this last segment that we ask every single one of our guests. It's called Bring Them Up on Stage. All right, Casey, is there anyone that you would recommend me reach out to and have them on to Theater in College Hoops and share some stories as you were so generous to do?
Oh boy, there's a lot of good ones. I would say, Luke Gore, who's on staff at Wichita State, would be a good one. He's been around for a while. If you're looking for somebody who would an assistant coach who I think is an up and comer that's going to be really good, Corey Farringer is at Northern Colorado. Jake Diebler is at Ohio State, is one of my good friends. And will be a head coach here soon. Roger Powell at Valparaiso has an unbelievable story and can share some more NBA and European stuff. But that's kind of top of mind right there. I think all those guys would have some pretty cool, unique stories to tell.
Casey, I'll be reaching out to them just like I reached out to you. I might be name dropping you because I had a blast here during this conversation. Casey Shaw, thank you so much for spending some time with us, sharing some stories. Best of luck here in this off season, and I can't wait to see what GCU does here in the coming future. Thanks, Casey.
I appreciate you having me on. This has been awesome. It's brought back a lot of good memories, so I really appreciate it. You have a good one.